Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our October 2017 customer webinar. Today, Christine Masters, our Director of Product Development, and Tim Turner, our Content Exchange Program Manager, will discuss best practices for covering breaking news events with TownNews.com's products and services. Christine was also online manager for Northwest Indiana Times for 10 years, and Tim was digital media manager at the Kokomo Times for 10 years. So they're going to bring a nice bit of experience to this.
Combined
in addition
experience.
to their obvious TownNews.com bona fides. We'll also look at ways to increase revenue when your traffic does spike. The presentation will take about 30 minutes and a Q&A will follow. At any time, you can type a question into the question box, but we'll hold off on answering them until the end. We've got a big agenda, a lot of slides, so I'm going to hand it off to Christine and Tim. Take it away, guys.
Awesome, thank you. So just really quickly here in terms of what we're going to be going over, talking about getting ready right before breaking news happens, what you can do to get ready, get your site ready, get your staff ready for breaking news. Once breaking news happens, how do you get the story out to the public? How do you build the story? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then also essentially how you spread the word beyond that and how you really promote it and what you do after you get the story up. So we'll talk about that. So just to get us started here, in terms of preparing your website, preparing your staff for these types of situations, I did want to kind of raise a little bit of an industry dilemma that is happening right now. Obviously, we have a lot of very tragic breaking news that has been happening, especially this week. And I think that a lot of different newsrooms are really struggling with how quickly do we post things online versus how well should that post be vetted, how many copy editors have to read it, etc. And I did want to just talk about this briefly. Obviously, we don't have necessarily all of the answers, but I just wanted to kind of show a couple of the sides of this just so that you can have this discussion in your newsroom. Many of you very likely already have. And we did talk to several people kind of in preparation for this webinar, and this was one of the things that a lot of people have discussed with us. So first off, I did find a really interesting article about a survey that they did, and it was in 2014, which is like 200 years ago, understand. But that being said, it was very interesting that one of the things 45% of journalists said that, again, this is 2014, that they will publish news first, and then if they have to, make corrections later. So that's kind of obviously the opposite is true. There would be a larger percentage of people who are more interested in making sure that the news is correct before they post. But this is something that is a split in the industry right now. So this is something that you kind of need to talk about in your own newsrooms and figure out what your determination is for when you actually put breaking news up. How quickly can you put it up while maintaining your level of accuracy? I also wanted to just mention very quickly, again, something that happened this week, which is I do think that there were some issues with Google and Facebook posting, their news algorithms prioritized news from, 4chan and some kind of like fake news sites that happened in regards to the Las Vegas shooting. And I think that just really illustrates the importance of journalism and journalism as a trade and people who are actually trained in the journalistic process. And it just really it enforces that this is an important thing. So that struggle between how quickly do we put it up and how do we maintain our journalistic ethics is something that is a big discussion right now. So that being said, let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so my background is in working with a lot smaller newsrooms, and whenever we would do breaking news or have a breaking news event, it meant for us that a lot of people were stepping into roles they didn't traditionally fulfill. So while our news editors might be out in the field collecting news, we would have to have maybe our lifestyles editor step into a role kind of on the digital production side, or a sports editor would be editing photos. So for us, it was really important to understand that when a breaking news event occurred, who was responsible for what. That way content wasn't just laying there waiting for someone in the field to get back to the office, to then edit or upload it to the web. I think what's also really important leading into that too was we had to make sure that everybody was kind of trained cross-functionally to be able to do each other's job, especially when a breaking news event occurred. I know Christine and I both have covered a lot of breaking news events in our time. We also talked to a lot of our customers who do a great job of breaking news. We took kind of the collective wisdom and we were able to create a breaking news guideline. That's kind of just a jumping off point. Obviously, this was built with kind of a much larger newsroom in mind, kind of with some of it, but you can take the things that do work and scale it down to fit your newsroom side. But this just kind of gives you a generic overview of some good steps to take to make sure your newsroom is prepared, not just on the technical side, which we'll get into later, but just on the, what each person's role is and what they need to do when a breaking news event occurs.
Yeah, so I would really definitely look. We put a bit.ly link on that page that links to a Google Doc for this, and then you can essentially come in here and then make a copy and save it locally in your own Google Drive, and then go through and kind of, if you don't have this already, go through and talk to your editors and your newsroom and find out what your policies are, what you feel comfortable with as your definition of breaking news. Obviously, this is just kind of an example of. This was provided very kindly by our friends at Lee Enterprises. So you can take this and edit it and modify it for what you feel comfortable with in your own newsroom, and then obviously hand that out to everybody, and they'll have a better idea of what types of things are breaking news. And it also just kind of gives you some ideas for, if you're going to the scene to cover breaking news, how to use BLOX Go to post the articles, if you're in the office, how to, add additional items to your stories to, get better engagement, things like that. So this is just a template for you to use, and feel free to take that and modify it and let us know how it works for you and if that was helpful. Let me go back here. And so again, that bit.ly link is bit.ly/breaking news guidelines.
We'll also include a link to that when we post the recording of the webinar. So if you don't get that, you'll be able to get it when it comes online.
Yeah, and please let us know if this was helpful to you, and we'll try to provide more things like that in the future if that was helpful.
Yeah, and if you have any updates or recommendations on how we can improve it, it will be kind of a living document that we can update as time goes by, and we want our customers to have access to in the future.
Definitely. One more other quick thing to mention in terms of preparing. One thing to look at definitely is what happens if something happens to your office locally. We've actually had several people involved and affected by hurricanes in multiple states and different things happening, wildfires recently. So make sure that you have a plan. I'm sure that this probably everyone has a plan for this already, but it's definitely something to think about. Make sure everyone knows about the plan, and then if you have our Total CMS product, make sure that if you have the disaster recovery backup, so that it's not in the same closet as your other appliance, that should be stored off-site so that it's available if something does happen to that local area.
Yeah, one of the things that we also wanted people to consider too is whenever we would see 30 to 40% bumps in monthly traffic from a breaking news event, especially we covered a lot of weather-related events, snow events, so we would see huge increases in traffic, but not necessarily early on weren't really capitalizing from a revenue side. So we got a lot better as time went by covering breaking news, to make sure that when a breaking news event did occur, that we adjusted our percentage of programmatic advertising to direct sold. Sometimes we would sell direct sponsorships, which were around like weather-related events, but really our goal was to get as much programmatic advertising on a breaking news coverage as possible. It makes it really easy. We'll talk a little bit about schedules later, where you can kind of have a schedule in place for breaking news that essentially switches your layout to be more programmatic advertising heavy, and it's just really as easy as flipping a switch there.
Yeah, and I did talk to somebody a couple weeks ago where they had a story go viral, and on that particular case, they didn't have any programmatic ads on there, and they ran in and added some just to make sure that they could help monetize that traffic. So a couple of quick things here about how to get your page ready for breaking news, again, before it happens. One thing to know, and this is in our documentation, and this is going to be linked to after we publish this as well in terms of the doc file about this, but breaking news, we have a kind of a special feature for breaking news where if you have a block on the front page that has a breaking news flag, and there's a couple others like top story and featured, there's a couple other flags that have this capability. If you have those flags on the front page in that block and the story comes in with those flags, it actually will essentially bust cache on the front page. And those items will go online much faster than they would if you're not using those mechanisms. So we have a special kind of loophole in our caching system for breaking news. So if it is something good to make sure that your site is set up that way. If you're doing, kind of edge case things like using a breaking news keyword tag or other keywords to try to get things onto the front page, you might want to look at doing at least the breaking news one using flags so that you do get that fast cache capability on the front page. I will just very quickly note that this doesn't necessarily affect your local browser cache. So sometimes in the newsroom, even though the story is online for new people that are coming into the article, you might not be seeing it locally unless you actually change your browser cache, so you can either shift, refresh, that kind of thing, to see that locally. So, and if you have any questions about this, feel free to submit a customer support ticket and they can, look at your front page and make sure it's set up correctly so that the breaking news goes online as quickly as possible. A couple other really quick things about how you can set up your front page to prepare for breaking news. And I've had this question a lot recently, especially as I was talking to different newsrooms about this, that they were really interested in this kind of information. So I'm gonna spend a couple minutes going through a couple of different block ideas. The first one is the editorial full article block, which is a block that will specifically just show a single article, almost looking exactly like an article page, but it can be shown on the front page. The really nice thing about this block is that it supports the hammer headline and the kicker and other headline types in it. So you're able to actually have a hammer headline, so a big impact headline, and then that will display big on the front page. The hammer headline is a field that's available, I think, in one of the side tabs in the article template, and it's not necessarily something that you use every day, but the nice thing about it is that it sizes automatically. It has a max size and a minimum size, but in between those two sizes, it will size automatically depending on how much space you have. So you're actually able to have a really short impact word, and then you're able to get those really big impact headlines for when you have that really big breaking news. And so that's something that some people have identified to us, that they were looking for those big breaking news blocks. And this is a really good example of one that works well for that. It will also show a photo here. If you actually upload an animated GIF, and it'll create a preview of it, and it will show the animated GIF on the front page. So El Vocero was recently dealing with the Hurricane Maria, and they had a great front page that had an actual animated GIF on there, and then a hammer headline, and it looked really nice for that scary kind of news coming up for them.
Hey, Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Real quickly, a question came in. Said, I've used the hammer headline function in individual articles, but you're saying we can use it on the home page as well with this specific block, correct?
Right. So that specific block will show the headline that is on that article. So yeah, so that particular block shows the headline and the hammer headline and the kicker for that article that you assign to that block.
And what was the block again?
It's the editorial full article block. Okay. Another good idea is, and we kind of put these out together because they're kind of meant to fulfill this particular need, but there's a block called the utility message block, and it's a pretty simple block that just allows you to set a couple of different sizes of headline, and then the color of the background, and then the color of the text. But with that block, you can kind of create these overline messages, which are really good for kind of alerts, I would say. Maybe not even, it might not even be as fleshed out as a breaking news article yet, but this is something where this particular block does not require that you even have an asset yet. You can just type something in. So if you've noticed on, a lot of, I'll use CNN for an example. A lot of times it'll say, just in, this thing happened. And it doesn't even link anywhere. They don't know anything else about it. They're just telling you this one thing. And they're frantically writing an article on the other end, but they're just letting you know that something's happened. So this is a really good example of that, to use the Skyline region and then put the utility message block in there and then configure it based on what you're looking for in terms of the impact of that breaking news. I'll also note very quickly that the Skyline region, there is a front page version of it and a global version of it. So obviously you can use that to decide whether you want this to go across your entire website. So regardless of where the person comes into the site, they're seeing that as big breaking news. Or if you just want it to be on the front page, that's a possibility there as well. Another quick thing, just make sure that you're kind of looking at other types of blocks for things that can be either breaking news blocks, big news block, featured top story blocks. We have a lot of different things that can be used for that. One thing that I wanted to point out is this is the card feature block, and so you can have a big featured image at the top of the page. And we also have aspect ratio settings that work on that block now, and you're able to create kind of either a big vertical block or an extreme horizontal block. We can actually even do an 8:3 aspect ratio, which would be even maybe half of the size of this particular thing, just so you get that that big top block. And then there's a setting in there called additional content. And if you turn on the additional content, either your siblings or children will show as additional headlines across the bottom. So again, this is a really good way when you have breaking news and you have that great impact headline or that great impact photo. You can put the photo up there, and then down here there could be either additional stories, a photo gallery. You might have a link to donate, a link to donate blood. There could be a whole bunch of different informational links that you can add on there at the bottom. So this is another great opportunity to try that out as well. One more really quick thing. Some people had asked me about this again in terms of talking with people for this webinar. Is for like live updates. So there are a lot of services out there that you can use that do kind of live updates. Scribble is one. You might want to have a Twitter widget, and that could be added as an HTML asset. Or you could just have an article, and that article is posting additional content throughout the day. So however you handle that. That being said, one thing is there's a custom property called Note. And if you add the custom property of Note to your article, it will create a little flag, a custom flag on the front page and on the article page itself that will be whatever you type in as the value of the custom property Note. So if you do have something that is a live blog, or let's say that it's another great example is if you're doing a Facebook Live video, and you're live now, you can take the Facebook Now video, include it on your site as an HTML asset, and then you could put a note on that asset that says Live Now. And then while you're live on Facebook Live, you could have the Live Now link showing up there, letting people know that you're live, and then when you're done, you can just remove that note. So that's another interesting strategy in terms of things that are available for promoting your content on the front page. Two really quick things about all of this different design stuff that I just talked about. One is in terms of preparing, with these blocks. The first thing is you can actually go ahead and add one of those blocks to the page and then have them disabled. There isn't a speed impact by including those things on the page. They aren't actually loaded into the page itself. We're not hiding it with CSS or anything like that. So it's definitely within reason. You don't want to have 200 disabled blocks on your front page, just in terms of storing it in the database or whatever. But it doesn't actually show on the front end. So having 3 or 4 different breaking news types of blocks or different, like Tim said, maybe you have 2 additional blocks that you can have disabled sitting there with programmatic ads. And when something happens, you want to re-enable those. You just go in there, uncheck the disabled block, save it, and then it's going to be live on your site. So that's a real easy way to make sure that you are set up ahead of time. And then if something happens, you might want to have a, super big breaking news with a hammer headline, and then a developing news with the feature block, and then maybe something else for the alert, and those are all set up in there by default that you can just enable them when you need them. Another strategy is something that we call schedules, and schedules basically says that you create a special version of the blocks on your front page. They're actually the same blocks and the same stories that you include elsewhere on your site. So if you edit one of the blocks, obviously you're editing it in every location, every layout that you're using it on your site. But this is just a different configuration of your blocks for this instance. And we have some people that set up a block for like breaking news that is set to be in 2025 in terms of the date or whatever, so it doesn't ever happen naturally. But if they needed to turn it on for big breaking news, then they could just swap in that schedule, activate it, and then that would be the live schedule on the page. That's more useful when you're adding in a lot of configuration changes for your site. You might have a situation where if you want to delete a bunch of the blocks from the page just to really emphasize that big breaking news and make the site a lot faster, and that could be something that you do with a different schedule. So that being said, we're going to talk a little bit now about actually getting the story out once you hear the breaking news.
Yeah, so obviously, we talked a little bit about, or we'll talk a little bit later about kind of mobile reporting, but Town News has great tools in getting content up there. With any breaking news event, your goal is to get it up as quickly as possible. And so when we talked about having a plan, some of that plan too is adjusting your workflow and what you expect from each step of the process. So a lot of us kind of have like a step 1 in our breaking news process. And step 1 is just basically to get as basic of the facts as you can out there as quickly as possible. A customer of ours, The Advocate, based out of Baton Rouge in New Orleans, they kind of they have a phrase called graph and dash where they kind of
Love that phrase.
They try to get 3 paragraphs up as quickly as possible to outline the overall kind of news event. And then their goal then is to have their team fill out that story as the event develops or as the story develops. One of the things too that you can do with blocks is you can always return an asset back to the workflow. As you make edits and needs to go back through your editorial copy or your copy editors, blocks makes it really easy to kind of take advantage of all that. And the other thing too is we want to make sure that as the story develops more and more, that we're referring all that traffic back to the original URL. You don't want to get that original SEO boost and then lose it all by publishing your big story on another URL. So the same story that you get that initial URL out on, that's the URL that you need to use as your kind of primary story URL for the rest of your content. And any other like ancillary content, sidebars, or other assets need to kind of link back to that original one just to give you the most value in terms of traffic from getting out there first and early on the story.
And just to add to that a little bit, if this is not something that you're doing currently, and I know that a lot of you are, but if this is not something that you're doing currently, this is something that it might actually take a little getting used to, and you might actually have to do some training in the newsroom to get them on this page. But like Tim said, the idea is put the story out there, get it on Twitter with that link. And then that link might just be like accident on 59th Street, more information coming soon, and that's it. And then you get it on Twitter, you get that URL out there, people start sharing it, and then you make great pains to go in and make sure that that same article is the one that you're updating all throughout the day. So you're adding, by the end of the day, there's 9 paragraphs there and a picture and a video, whatever. But don't keep creating new stories as those come in. Try to keep them to that same URL so you're getting that SEO impact.
Yeah, and when you update a story, you can obviously post on social media again about the update, but just link back to that same article or that same asset, if it's a collection or an article, just to make sure you're just reinforcing your claim on that story.
And somebody might email it to somebody in 3 hours later, they're looking at it, and then you want to make sure that they're seeing the newest information as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few times where I've gone back to breaking news stories, and then you kind of have to navigate around the site to find
what actually happened,
the individual elements. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's good advice. And like I said, a lot of you are doing that now anyway. A couple other quick things about some of the tools that you can use. We do have a mobile reporting interface. If you go to the BLOX admin using your phone, you will come to a page that looks a little bit like this that allows you to do some of the basic features within the BLOX admin while on your phone. So you can write an article, you can upload images, you can upload video. It's actually a fairly nice interface where it does now work with your phone. When we first launched this, the phones didn't have the capability of letting the website, see the camera on the phone. But now we have the capability of doing that, and you can actually upload media. You can multiple select a bunch of different photos on your phone and videos, and they'll just all upload batched together into the BLOX Go interface. And then that's something that either you might want to empower the reporter on the scene to be able to just post breaking news themselves, and you can do that from within BLOX CMS Go. Or it might be something where they're just doing kind of a starter article and uploading all of the blocks, and then the newsroom that's back at the office will see those coming into the system and then can configure them or set them up how they want to. So that's definitely something to look at if you haven't used that before. One other quick thing to notice that is something that we added a while ago, but a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually come in here and search articles that exist in the system. So if you're not just ones that you created, so if you're an editor and you wanted to make a change to something or correct a story or add to a story and you're at the grocery store or whatever, you could actually log in with BLOX Go and make that change, add to it, change the flag, etc.
Quick question,
Yeah.
came in on BLOX Go, wondering where to go to download BLOX Go.
So BLOX Go is actually a web interface. So just go to admin.townnews.com when you're in on your phone, and it will automatically send you to the BLOX interface.
So there's
where you can
nothing
log
to
in.
download.
Correct.
Yeah, just log in with your same credentials you'd use to log in on the desktop version. So, and then they'll load up your site and everything for you.
Yep. Another just really quick thing I'll mention, and this is something that you'll have to figure out how to set this up with our documentation because it does require you having a special email address, etc. But it's actually a very little known feature that we have, and it's actually very cool for breaking news, is we have something called a post by email service. It's available in editorial application settings, and then there's a little area called, I think it's content importers, and you can create a email address. Now, the way that we would recommend doing this is and again, we have a whole doc on this, is there's a special kind of difficult to figure out email address that you can configure. And you would give that to essentially your reporter who's going on the scene, and they could actually email the story to BLOX. BLOX captures it. It actually can allow you, depending on the email address that you use, and you can have multiple. So you could have one for sports, one for breaking news, one for a particular person that's posting updates from Michigan, whatever. And you can say anything that comes from this address automatically gets flagged as breaking news. You can check it to auto-publish or not based on the address, and you can add additional photos. And then you can set it up so that whoever the sender is, if their email address matches a user in the system, they will be the byline author of that article. So there's some really great things that you can do with that. So make sure to look in our help docs and check out how to set that up, because I think that can be helpful for a lot of these situations as well. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, sure. So this is a tool that actually I still have Dropbox on my phone to this day. I love Dropbox. It's from a town news and a breaking news perspective. What I like about Dropbox is it's a way for your people in the field to automatically sync assets to a shared account that then editors back in the newsroom can take advantage of. So on my phone, I can take photos or videos on my phone and set my phone to auto sync those new photos that I take to Dropbox. And then if it's a shared Dropbox account with the newsroom, then the newsroom has access to those photos instantly, and I don't have to worry about uploading those photos or putting those photos in Dropbox. It just automatically syncs from my phone into Dropbox, and then the newsroom can kind of do whatever they want. Same thing with primary source material. If you're covering like an event like budget hearings or stuff like that go on a lot, and you're getting like PDFs or other primary source material, you can kind of drop that in Dropbox and then always refer to it later when you need those primary documents. So again, Dropbox is a great tool for sharing primary files, particularly images, PDFs, even videos. I've done a lot of video sharing with Dropbox as well, so can't speak highly enough of that tool and being able to use it within the BLOX interface.
And obviously they have a really nice app. So if you really wanted to have an
Right.
app where you could upload photos to the app, this is a good option for that people can just grab them from there.
Yeah, and it's a thing if you don't want to train everybody on BLOX Go too, they can just have access to Dropbox. Another feature that Town News added after I was a customer, but I still take advantage of as the content program manager for our programs, is the ability to directly search Twitter within BLOX and then easily add tweets into the content. Obviously, the way we cover breaking news has changed a lot, where we take advantage of social media. When you can essentially turn everybody in your community kind of into a reporter covering a breaking news event or a photographer, that's always really great. And then also the way that organizations communicate has also changed. And we see more and more organizations using Twitter and social media to communicate out what's going on for kind of if it's kind of a community-wide breaking news event. So I've built entire stories essentially just using tweets and paging. So if you haven't taken advantage of this yet, it's a great feature. Obviously, there's a picture of Donald Trump. He's great. He tweets a lot. So and the federal government tweets a lot too. So if you're covering a national breaking news event, it's a great resource. I've covered. I can't tell you how many other national breaking news events just using primarily Twitter as a source of information. So definitely take advantage of this tool if you aren't yet in BLOX.
Yeah, and now we see a lot too, even things like there's a university and there's an active shooter warning at the university or whatever, you'll see it on Twitter first, which is
Right.
pretty remarkable. So a lot of times those things are important. And if you do use our official Twitter button, a lot of people use HTML assets right now. If you do use this official Twitter button, it actually works in other environments as well. So we'll modify it, for example, for accelerated mobile pages, AMP pages. It actually will automatically show the correct implementation of those tweets when you're viewing that in AMP as well.
Yeah, and also the thing I like about Twitter is it shows you who the source of the information is, like in the card. So when someone reads the tweet, they know the president said this, or the university is the one who's communicating this message. So I always like to try to give readers access to as much primary material as possible, and Twitter is, like I said, a great way to tie the quote to the person who said it, and yeah. Another thing that you can definitely take advantage of from Town News, something that we've been doing for the last couple of years, is our content exchange program. There's two different ways you can use this. Obviously, we have a lot of customers. We have over 500 customers or domains participating in the content exchange. We're in 47 states. So if there's kind of a statewide event going on, or if you want to see what other communities around you, how they're covering certain events, you can always look in the content exchange and pull in kind of regional or statewide breaking news. But we also provide access to CNN and Newsy, who are both national news agencies covering breaking news events. And so if you know that there's a big breaking news event going on, like the hurricanes or a shooter event or something like that, You can obviously pull assets from CNN or Newsy, communicate those out to your users, and then build your own local coverage off of that. Man on the streets, op-eds, or other stuff, and tie that back to those the content you're getting from CNN or Newsy. CNN and Newsy are both video content producers, and some of these breaking news events are just better in video format. I think, especially the stuff that they tend to cover, they know what works well for them, and so when they push stuff out, it's very good.
The content exchange sounds pretty great. How much does it cost?
Oh my gosh, I was just going to do that. I was going to do that exact thing.
Yeah, so the Content Exchange is a free program that we offer to all of our customers. It does require an agreement simply to protect the intellectual property rights of all the participants in the Content Exchange. So yeah, it's a really great program. Like I said, 500 domains already participating in it. We're curating several thousand articles a week out of 250,000 articles a month that we get. So we're getting lots of really great content.
Can I take the content but not share my content?
So we have other webinars we've done on the Content Exchange, and also
so I should go read one of them.
Yeah,
okay.
we have more information about the Content Exchange up on our website. I understand that there might be some of you on this call who aren't familiar with the program, but it's a really good program, and I want to bog down this presentation talking about the Content Exchange. But if you're not in it, please contact your sales rep. They are well versed in it, and they can kind of tell you how you can sign up and participate in the program.
Yeah, and this is just to give you a quick example. There's a breaking news story about Donald Trump announced blah blah blah. You'll have the tweet like we just talked about. You can go look at the Content Exchange and see if there's a video of him on CNN saying it. It's like just great additional content that you can add.
One thing I like about Content Exchange and using local news for national news events is sometimes the local perspective, I think, is a lot better than kind of when you have national outsiders coming in to cover an event. So, I mean, we've had events like, obviously, hurricane coverage from users affected by that, officer-involved shootings in Ferguson and Alton Sterling incident in Louisiana. The Charlottesville events were all covered by local news participating in the Content Exchange. So it's really good to get the holistic perspective of what it means and what it means for the community. And usually they have a lot better insight than a national news outsider coming in trying to understand what's going on.
Absolutely. A couple of really quick things talking about actually promoting the content. Now that you've got the great CNN video and the tweets, and you've got the information from your reporter on the scene, you've got all the Dropbox photos, how do you spread the word? This is actually a feature that we've had for a while. A lot of people use this now, but we have something called social media broadcast. You can set up multiple different channels to Twitter and Facebook. You assign them, essentially make that channel available to this certain section. And then inside of the BLOX admin for creating the article, there's actually a broadcast tab. And you can decide which channels this goes out to, either Twitter, Facebook, different Facebook pages, and then you can actually type in the messages that go along with either Twitter or Facebook. And then as soon as the article goes out, then it auto tweets them for you to those areas. So it's a great feature, and if you're not using that already, feel free to ask us about that. We can help you set it up. It's a great way to empower the reporters to do that as part of creating the story. Another really quick thing to mention, this is something new that we have added in the last couple of months. We have a email newsletter platform that is integrated into the BLOX CMS that works really great together. We have great email-specific templates that you can set up to make sure that the email newsletters are attractive and mobile-friendly. And now we've added the capability of sending emails directly out based on different, essentially, properties that you can set up in your system. So, for example, I could say anything with the news section that has a breaking news flag on it. As soon as it is saved and live and its start date is hit, it will send out an automatic newsletter to the news, the mail list that you have designated in email reach. It will automatically send out the newsletter to that list. So instead of having your newsroom trained to go into BLOX email reach and send it through a send tool or send some other kind of message that way, you can essentially have the trigger being the breaking news flag or the top news flag or anything that you want to set up will actually allow kind of empower the newsroom to be able to do that throughout their workflow. So it's much easier to do rather than having to have an editor do that. So I mean, we have a lot of people that are possibly using different systems and interfacing with BLOX to do the same functionality, but now it's something that we offer natively. So that's another thing to check out if you haven't seen that already.
Yeah, another thing too, if you have a breaking news event, so not necessarily a story that just pops up, but weather-related event or some other event that you're going to treat like as part of your breaking news coverage, we always recommend that you create a new section tag or URL for that coverage. It gives you a really good opportunity to do a more graphical display, to create more sponsorship opportunities, and to adjust the advertising. So this is something that I've done a lot when it comes to breaking news coverage, especially weather, because you're adding a lot of like weather-related, GPS and satellite imagery and all that stuff to your page. It's just really nice if you have one place that you can direct all your users to, especially if it's something really easy like /Maria, like what the El Vocero did for Hurricane Maria coverage. It just really helps the users continue to find that coverage. That way they're not trying to re-navigate or have to go to the front page and compete with all your other local news coverage. Something else that if you're participating in the AP or CNN wire services or other wire services, obviously you have an avenue to push your content out. But even if you're not, I always recommend that you have kind of a email list or email sheet of either kind of national or statewide or regional contacts that you can send your coverage to. I mean, I did this a lot. We didn't participate in the wire services, so if we thought a story had an impact beyond just our community, we wanted to make sure that other communities were aware of this. And whether those newspapers linked back to our story or they did their own coverage, if something's important enough, I think kind of as a journalism community, it's important to send that out there. So we actually had a list in Indiana of papers that we would always send out like these big statewide breaking news stories to, so that they could do their own thing. And the same thing, if they had a story, we would always share that and promote it for them as well. Because, like I said, it's all about serving the community and making sure that the stories get out there. Another way to kind of get stories out and spread and to increase your presence. Obviously, we use social media a lot, but if you ever spend any time looking at your referral traffic, you'll see tons of weird domains in there, and if you follow them, you'll see that there's tons of communities built around organizations in your community or interests in your community. And Christine was telling me this story, and I thought it was really good about one of our publishers actually has her reporters get the email addresses of the people they're interviewing or talking to in a story. And so once they publish the story, they then send that email out. And then that person, in turn, will then distribute that content out. So it's really important to know who's affected by a story and then make sure you have that contact information and share your content with them. And they'll do a great job of distributing your content for you. So yeah, it's definitely a good tip to always make sure you're collecting that email contact information and emailing your stories out to the affected parties once you're ready to publish.
Yeah, one example is they did like a profile of a local teacher, and that teacher graduated from University of whatever, and they ended up tweeting it out on that, and they had 3 million followers or whatever, and that really increased their traffic. So it's a great way to find additional avenues of promotion. One other quick thing to talk about on this, which I think this is not not something that a lot of people know, but is a really interesting concept. So imagine that you did have a breaking news story and you kind of followed what we were doing earlier. You got the URL out there quickly. You were getting a lot of viral traffic to it throughout the day. You were adding more content to it. And then it kind of becomes obvious that this is a big story and that this is getting national news, and you are, you're adding a photo gallery, and this is kind of becoming a really big deal. And like Tim was just saying, you go in and you set up a special section. Now you have all this great content on the special section, but people are still coming in from that first story link that you put out this morning, right? One of the things that you can do is actually take that story, and it can be any story, a photo gallery, any URL on the page, and you can actually redirect it to the new domain or the new URL that you created for this story. So let's say that you had, we'll use Galveston News as an example here, that they had a photo gallery of the flooding that was going viral, and what they did is they actually took that photo gallery story and redirected it. So again, this is a collection asset, and they used an editorial custom property called redirect. And again, this is in our documentation, so you can look that up if you need more information. But it's called redirect, and you put redirect on there, and then you redirect that to the new section that you created specifically about the flood. And on that page, they had a lot of additional photos and a lot of additional additional collections, and then obviously you might have additional advertising, programmatic advertising on that page as well. And then you're essentially converting that traffic that is coming in based on that initial URL and converting it to your special section URL to get your expanded coverage on that, because now that you have that information, you're providing them all that information so that, like Tim said, you don't have to go search for it and find out the most updated thing. You know that they're coming in to look for flooding pictures, and then this is a way that you can provide them the best content that you have. And just another really quick thing, I've had this question a lot of times in terms of after-hours support where something happens in the community, and as a community service, the publication wants to provide their content for free for 3 days or whatever to the community, because you're providing, public service. You're providing information and news about how to stay safe and about what's happening and about, the gas leak and the school was evacuated and whatever's going on. You're providing very important information to the community, and a lot of times people will want to provide that information for free for a brief period of time. In that case, one of the easiest things to do is in our subscription product, we have something called a rule profile, and the rule profile actually determines which URLs the subscription is activated on. And all you have to do is go into the other tab of the rule profile and click on disable rule restrictions. That essentially means that the subscription is deactivated or not needed on those URLs. People can still subscribe or use the subscription services the same way. It's just that they're not needed to view those URLs. So it's a great way to kind of keep subscription active and not turn it off as a whole. They can still subscribe, but this way they're able to actually go into those URLs and they can be free for that period of time. So it's a real easy way, in the middle of the night to disable rule restrictions, be free, and then turn it back on in the morning or whatever you're doing. So I think that is, I know we talked a little bit too much, but.
Great stuff. We do have a lot of questions.
Okay, great.
The first one's going to make you think. How would you recommend we avoid any accidental political bias when we're trying to report on a controversial topic like gun control, kneeling for the national anthem, etc.?
I don't know, Tim, you want to start with that one? That's hard.
Yeah, I mean, that is a pretty hard one. I mean, to me, like I said, again, really focusing on less throwing your opinions or getting too verbose in your lead-ins to your quotes, but just let the quotes stick to themselves. The players kneeled. This is why the players kneeled. This was a response to kneeling, and you also have to just use your normal news judgment. Does the president's opinion on the fact that NFL players kneeled, is that important? Is this a political story, or is this kind of should the NFL's response? Or, you have to kind of use your own judgment on that. But to me, I like to just keep it to let the sources, add the commentary. And then our job is just to transition in between those kind of quotes from the sources.
And I think, too, my opinion on that would just make sure that you as a newsroom have guidance to your reporters on how to deal with that. If you want to make sure that your most important thing is getting that news out there quickly, so put that out and then we'll talk, or then we'll talk about, the impact of it, etc. Or if you want to have it run by an editor first, or if you want to have, whatever your guidelines are, make sure that those are established in advance and those are communicated to people so that you can set the guidelines for, what your expectations are for those editors and those staffers who are doing the breaking news. I will say one really quick thing. One thing that I talked about I actually asked a couple of people about this recently, like how do they deal with this? And one of the people said, well, a lot of the stuff we're doing is local news, and we've got a reporter who's at the courthouse, and the guy was found guilty. There's not a lot of questions or bias that goes into that. You can say, yeah, I'm at the court, he's guilty, here's the story. There's not a lot of, fact checking or sources that you need because the guy was there. So those types of stories, might have less controversy involved, and local staffers might be more enabled and empowered to themselves do those. And then if there are things that are more controversial or politically dangerous, that might be something that you have editors talk about.
Okay. A couple of questions around keeping a story up to date. You were talking about updating a story as it develops. Both of these questions have to do with what happens to the URL if you change the title tag, or if you change the headline of the story. What happens to the URL and what happens to your traffic?
Yeah, we actually employ a technique called a virtual URL. And so when you see the title tag in there, the title tag, if you're adding the title tag to your URL, which most of you are, that title tag will change and the URL change, but it just 301s back to the original URL. So it does not impact the URL. It won't create a broken link or a 404 or anything like that. So that shouldn't cause a problem. We also made sure that if there are things like numbers that are included in the title, those numbers actually don't get included in the URL. For that reason is that we anticipate people, upping the count or whatever in the URL, and then that's something that happens. And so those things don't actually change the URL. But yeah, it will 301, so there's no danger there.
Okay, a couple of follow-up questions on how to get to BLOX Go. First of all, one of the folks commented that for sites on the New York server, you need to change the URL from Chicago to New York in order to log in. What is the URL again for folks to get there?
Well, I'll say this. This is probably the easiest way. If you go to your domain name /tncms/admin, and then that will work on the phone. That's the easiest way. It will automatically direct you to wherever you need to go. So again, that's something that your newsroom will remember. Obviously, hopefully, your URL. So your URL /tncms/admin, and then that will automatically redirect you to whichever place you need to go.
Yeah, that's kind of an internal thing that we use whenever we're troubleshooting a site. If we're on the front end and want to go to the back end of that site, just add /tncms/admin.
And it doesn't matter which data center you're in, you're going to get to the right place. Are we able to format the tweet integration like we can child assets? For example, can we align it right and center, those kinds of things?
No, that's a good question. We cannot right now, other than just whatever options you have in the story editor. You could, possibly change some things regarding how it looks inside the story. But no, that's not available right now. But that's something that we could look at.
What is Scribble? You talked about how to create custom property notes with it, like Facebook Live. How do I find it?
Yeah, so Scribble Live is a third-party program that we have a lot of our partners using them. That they have kind of a live blogging service, and they'll essentially let you create kind of a new live blog, and then you get an embed code from them, and then you can create that as an HTML asset in our system. There's a lot of other kind of really cool services out there. Storyful is another one I mentioned. I think Livefire, people are using Livefire. Facebook Live. So there's another thing, using getting a Twitter widget. So you can go into Twitter and create a new widget with just a certain hashtag, and then everybody who talks to that hashtag will be included in that widget. Or even you could have 3 different accounts in Twitter. Those 3 accounts are assigned to this Twitter list, and then you can put that Twitter list in as an HTML asset, and then those 3 reporters are all talking to that Twitter list, and that creates the effect of a live blog. So there's a bunch of different kind of third-party things that you can use for that, and then just include them into blocks as an HTML asset. I will say, though, that we have a lot of people that just use a story. You can use a story with either the update-related content, which will create like a little stack of updates at the top of the page, or just in the article itself, say update from 2:30 p.m. and then write this thing, and then say update from 4:30 p.m. and then write more. So any of those things can be very effective depending on the specific thing that you're looking to do.
One of the participants notes that if you change the URL of a story, the posts on our Facebook comments have been lost because they're assigned to specific URLs.
I would send in a CRM ticket about that. It sounds like we actually, when we first implemented Facebook comments, that was a problem. We found a fix for that. So if you're using our most updated Facebook integration, we actually created a permanent URL that is not impacted at all by the title or any other changes that you make. And so therefore you don't lose the comments in that regard. So it sounds like you're using either some custom implementation or might have something that's older or something like that. So call our CMS or our CS staff, and we can talk to you about that solution.
Okay. Someone else, another comment about Facebook. It seems social media broadcast isn't seen as well on Facebook as when you manually post an item.
I have not heard that before. I would be surprised. I mean, it's posting from the, essentially the page that you hook it up with. So if, it's possible that an individual reporter has better visibility in the news feed. And then if so, then I would post it from that reporter's, account. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that, Tim? Yeah, I'd be interested to hear if there's more evidence of that, and we could look into what the specific issue is. I have not heard that before.
There are some variables there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Is social media broadcast available on an article basis?
Yes. On each article is essentially configured with all of the different channels. So you can set up multiple channels, and then depending on the sections that particular article is in, it will have the capability to broadcast to a couple of different channels. So let's say you have a sports Twitter feed or a sports Twitter account. Then in your sports section, it's configured to talk to the sports Twitter account, and then you just check the box and then type that in and then save the article, and then it will tweet to that account.
Okay. Several folks have asked if they can get a copy of the slideshow. We will be posting the webinar recording and the slideshow to our website. Those will both be posted before the week is out. To get those, you can go to timenews.com, click on the news link on the menu bar at the top of the page, and on our news page, if you scroll down about 3/4 of the way down the page, there's a recent webinars section that will display those webinars. We will also send out a link next week to the webinar recording and to download the slide deck and all the other materials that you folks have talked about here.
Yeah, we would love it if you could, take pieces of this and repurpose it as, some training or guidance for your newsroom, and let us know if you're able to do that. That we would love to be able to help you, with that kind of training and internal communications.
Are push notifications to cell phones available?
We have something called the SMS list that does text messaging. A lot of times push notifications will be coming from an app. So if you have an app that you're using, a lot of times, you'll be looking at ways to push things to your app, and then the app will do the push notification. We are actually looking at doing desktop notifications, which is a relatively new technology that they are now empowering on different browsers. There's not really a unified way to do it to the browsers yet, but that's something that we're looking at also. But so, yeah, there's a couple different ways to do that. Most likely, I would look at if you have some kind of an app, how you can use the app to push notifications to the phone that way, because that's most likely what you're talking about specifically.
How do you keep automatic emails from sending out every time an asset is updated?
That's a good question. So by default, it will only send the email once. So that's the first thing. We do have a feature that you can enable where if you have the important updates feature turned on, and this is something that is, if you want to have like a date that says that this was updated 5 minutes ago, for example. A lot of times people don't want it to say, this story was updated 5 minutes ago because they just like changed some punctuation or something. So if that's something that is concerning to you, we do have this feature called Important Updates. It's in the application settings in editorial. If you turn that on, then it basically says that we won't change the modified date of the article unless you check this little box that says that it's important. And then that will change the modified date of the article, and then that way you'll see that this was updated 5 minutes ago on the front end. And if you're using that feature will be used to send the article again. So if you're using automatic articles and you say this is an important update, that will send that article again. So that is something, again, depending on how you set up your workflows and your training with the newsroom, that you can do either way, enable that either way.
Can you disable subscription for one particular story?
I think that there is a way to do that. I would look in our docs. I think that we have a bypass. I think it's called bypass subscription, I think.
I think it's subscription bypass.
Subscription bypass, yeah. So look on our help site for, like, search for the word bypass, and I think that there's a custom property that you can add to the article that will just turn off subscription for that one article.
A couple of questions on whether or not we're looking at adding push notifications to the roadmap.
We do have it on our roadmap. I don't have an ETA yet in terms of how soon we'll be able to do that with a couple of other priorities. But that is something that we're very interested in. I mean, obviously, the reason for doing that sort of thing is we're looking for more and more ways to get the news out to the users for them to come back to the site, because essentially people are looking at news sites specifically, even though they're looking at news more than ever before, they're looking at news sites, like going directly to the site less. They're looking at, social, they're looking at, actually Googling it, they're looking at their Twitter and Facebook and their emails and things like that. So we're getting the news to them a lot of different ways, and they're coming back and reading those news. So we want to try to make sure that we're pushing that out to them as much as possible. So that is definitely something that we're looking at.
We use broadcast channels for Facebook and Twitter for all of our stories. Are there broadcast channels beyond Facebook and Twitter that we should know about?
We don't have that right now. We are looking at doing a couple of different things. Email reach is a really obvious one, so that you can do kind of we do have obviously the automated push, but this would be kind of a non-automated way to do it easily from within the story editor. But yeah, let us know if there's any other specific thing that you would like to have configured there, and we could definitely look at that. I will just say, again, to emphasize that you can set up multiple accounts. So you could have 5 different Twitter accounts and 5 different Facebook pages, and all of those configured to different sections. So that is supported now.
How often does Google AMP refresh a story?
That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head, but yeah, that's something that I could find out. If you want to either send me a quick email at cmasters@townnews.com, I could look into that, or send us a CS ticket, and we can look at that. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Can an urgent flag be used on one story that goes up in a block that contains multiple stories, or must you create a block designed to hold just that one story that you will flag as urgent?
So I assume that that's related to the breaking news thing, and yes, well, first off, you can put an urgent flag on a story that goes into just a random block, but that won't trigger the fast cache feature. It has to be both an urgent flag and a block that is configured to pull in things with urgent flags on them. So just having an urgent flag anywhere on your page doesn't trigger that feature. It has to be both a block query rule set up to look for that flag and an item with that flag coming in. But it will show up in a block, but it's not triggering that fast cache feature.
Okay. A couple other follow-up questions or comments on the Facebook broadcast. We have problems with Facebook posts that don't populate with the proper lead photo and headline. Sounds like perhaps talk to customer support about that.
So yeah, I mean that's definitely something to talk to customer support. I will say though that there's two key things to know about this. One is that Facebook is supposed to look at what's called the OG image tag, and this is essentially like a meta tag that is included in the page. So one of the things that you can do kind of as you're troubleshooting those kind of situations is view the source on the page and look at what is configured as the OG image on that particular article. And then if it's actually the thing that is showing up on Facebook and it's the wrong thing, then you can kind of look in blocks as why that's happening. Oh, it's because maybe the one that you thought was going to be the top one is set to no publish. I've had that happen before. Or maybe the start date hasn't happened yet on the one that you think is going to go in there. And so you can fix that on the BLOX side, is that BLOX is configured to then show whatever it thinks is the top thing as the OG image tag. So that's the first step on that, is to look what your OG image tag is saying. And then if it's saying the wrong thing, then you can fix that on the BLOX side.
When you say top thing, are you saying the top listed related image
Exactly,
asset? Okay.
yeah. It'll show essentially the main image on that particular article as the OG tag. So if it's showing the wrong OG tag in the metadata, that's why Facebook is picking up the wrong thing, and then you can go troubleshoot on the BLOX side. If the OG tag is correct in BLOX and it's correct in the code of the page, but Facebook is not listening to us and then doing something else, that's a more difficult one. Obviously, it's kind of difficult to see what mood Facebook is in that day, what algorithms they have working. Most of the time, it doesn't like that image because of the size, and that's something to look at. We mostly have that kind of figured out now, and that doesn't happen as much, but that's something to look at.
We don't have the option to put in additional comment with broadcast. How do I set this up?
I would send a ticket to customer support, and we can help look at that. There should be an option for if you're sending it to Twitter or Facebook. There's a little box in there.
Is there a way to have a breaking flag automatically expire? We have multiple editors using breaking flags, and unfortunately, sometimes they forget to take off the flag, which leaves the breaking flag at the top of our site.
That's a really great question. We get that question a lot. I actually should have talked about that in the webinar, so I'm glad you asked. First off, we do have that as a feature request. That is something that we would like to do. That being said, besides having kind of an expiration on the breaking news block, there is a way in the block itself that you can say, in this particular block, don't show anything that's older than 2 hours or 4 hours or 24 hours, however you want to set that up. So that's one way. Another way is you can set an archive date on that story and then set up the block to not show things that have passed their archive date. So that's an easy thing to do, and then that way you can configure it on a per story basis. The third way to do that is with sticky assets, that you can essentially pin an asset to the breaking news block. And when you right-click on the pinned asset, you can actually set a schedule on the pin. And so you can say, I'm pinning this particular story to the breaking news widget for 2.5 hours, and then at that point it expires. It'll still have the breaking news flag on it, but it will no longer be pinned to that specific block, and it will fall back into wherever it was naturally configured to go. So those are 3 different ways that you can do it depending on what works best for you. And I know it's going to be hard to remember all that, so feel free to submit a ticket and say, Christine said this thing. Can you explain that again? And we get those tickets, which is that's great. So feel free to submit a ticket, and I will. They'll come ask me, and I'll have them explain it in greater detail.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That's all for the questions. If you'd like to advance to the final slide. Thanks everyone for participating in this webinar. Great participation, great questions, and great job, Tim and Christine. There are many ways to stay connected with us. You can view documentation for all the features we've discussed here at help.bloxcms.com, or call our support team at 800-293-9576, or visit support.townnews.com if you need assistance with any of the products or services we've talked about. The partner community is a great place to swap ideas. We've talked about a lot of ways to cover breaking news, and if you have any suggestions that we haven't shared here, please feel free to talk about those at the community site. And you can view the status of our systems at townnews.status.io. You can actually sign up to receive alerts and notifications about our system status. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Additionally, you can stay connected with us by signing up for the wide variety of newsletters and emails that we offer. Go to townnews.com, click News, and you'll see a Stay Connected box sidebar there that lists all of our email communiques, and you can sign up right on the website. Thank you very much, Tim and Christine, and thanks everyone for joining us and participating. And we will talk to you next month.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.